Um, yeah, I mean, like obviously on the show we talk about the tech in our lives and how how it affects us. And I think the biggest focus that we've kind of fallen into is thinking about things that you don't normally think about as being either technology or affecting you in ways that you might not realize unless you think about it, kind of.
Right, right. Yeah.
Um, and I mean, like, I think today I kind of wanted to talk a bit about audio
Sure.
because we've touched on some of the other technology aspects of our lives, and I mean streaming services we've touched on a couple times, but I think as far as the actual audio technology, I'm very interested in that, but I don't have a lot of technical background in it outside of just my everyday experience with audio
Yeah.
technology. And even then, it's like, I mean, you grab a pair of like $10 earbuds off the rack and throw them in your ears, and you're usually fine with that. But I know
Sure.
that there's a lot more depth that you can get into when it comes to audio technology. So I'm very interested to talk a bit about that with you because I mean that's your job now. I
Yeah.
mean I don't know if it was before, but it definitely is now.
It
And
definitely
I
is
guess, but
now.
before we get started, maybe uh, for our listeners, I mean, again, Rob's not here today, so today we have Kyle Marshall. And Kyle, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Oh boy. So I guess I'll just start with what is currently going on in my life. I am a born and bred Albertan. I live currently in Calgary, Alberta, and I run a studio called Media Lab that is downtown Calgary, and it's there to help people tell their stories, whether that is through audio form, like a podcast, or whether it's through video form, like an online video for YouTube or Vimeo or any of those other types of services. That is basically what my full-time gig is here currently, is being able to help businesses and individuals come in and be able to use this kind of new media technology in their everyday lives. I also, because I love having too many things to do in my life, I'm also running different events through Media Lab, but I also co-host two different podcasts. I also upload two videos each week to YouTube, and I'm constantly finding other things to fill my like not available time with.
Cool. And so, what are those podcasts that you're on?
Good question. This is how I'm terrible at marketing. So I do a podcast with my friend Grant, who lives down in California. So we do a weekly-ish Skype call together. It's called Whatever This Is. It's kind of like a comedy pop culture podcast. And then the second one I do is called Assumptions, which I co-host with my friend Daniel. And that is kind of billed as a atheist and a Christian have a polite conversation with each other. Whereas I am the atheist, my friend Daniel is the devout Christian, and we were kind of sick and tired of seeing talking heads on news and on radio just yell at each other and not actually sit down and listen to one another. And so that's the show we created. We bring up different topics, we listen to the other person's point of view. It's interesting, having done the show, how often we actually agree with one another in the overall, but maybe not on the specifics. uh, so it's very few times we actually outright disagree with one another. But even when we do, we still are friends afterwards.
Yeah. Cool. And Assumptions is a member of the Alberta Podcast Network powered by ATB. So those interested, you can check out Kyle's show there. And whatever this is there a place they can find that show if they're
Yeah, you
interested?
can go onto Apple Podcasts and Google Play. Those are the two main places that you can find it.
Cool. So you did mention that you have your own media lab, and
Yeah.
and I mean that's why I feel that audio technology is a good kind of topic for us to talk about today. So I guess maybe just starting with how like our experiences with audio and I guess music is probably the most typical case of audio experience. And how your interest in audio and technology in general kind of came to where it is today. I mean, like growing up, um, what was it like, kind of getting into music and audio and the
Sure.
technology thereof?
You know, I often kind of joke around saying that I grew up having an awful taste in music, which is not entirely untrue. So I grew up on a small farm a couple hours north of Calgary in this little town called Rocky Mountain House. which always sounds like a made up place, I think, to a lot of people, but that was the legitimate name of the small town I grew up in, on a farm just outside of it. And my family, or at least my mom and dad, they were primarily country music listeners. And I still do have an affinity for what I call real country music and not like modern day country music. And I guess that is where I started from. However, on the country station, and I only was thinking about this recently, and I think this is what got me into podcasting years later. But on this country station, they had at noon and I think at 5 o'clock, twice a day, there was the show hosted by a man called Paul Harvey. I don't know if you remember him or not.
The name sounds familiar.
Yes, he has since passed away many, many years ago. But his show was the rest of the story, and so he would tell these really interesting stories about really famous people, but he would always save who the person was until like the very, very end,
Mm.
oftentimes. So he would tell this really fascinating, in-depth story, something that you may never have heard before, and then like hit you with that interesting hook at the very end and be like, and this is who this person was, and that's the rest of the story that you don't hear about. And I
Mm.
was always fascinated. I always wanted to make sure that I was around the radio, especially when I was home from school or during the summertime, so I could listen at 12, I could listen at 5 o'clock to the two different programs he was doing that day. Just a great radio voice that definitely helped me get really interested in audio storytelling originally, was from them. If we flash forward many, many years later, definitely I was getting into music. I've always had a very different interest in music, where growing up I was not into necessarily the popular bands or the popular music groups. I still was like, I was aware of them and I knew the songs, but my love was actually musical theater. I was
Mm.
like obsessed with Broadway and like the history of Broadway, mostly because my grade 5 teacher brought in the cast album of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And for whatever reason, just flipped a switch on in my brain. I was like, this is what my thing is. And so it was me just collecting cast albums as much as I could and listening to that. And that still actually exists to this day. It's something that's never, ever really left me. Music was something that I got really more into, I would say, like pop music and rock music in university, where I was actually introduced to a lot of stuff that I hadn't really been partial to growing up, and started like collecting Rolling Stone magazines and reading up on the history of stuff and kind of obsessing out about that sort of thing. Um, but in a weird, yeah, sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna ask, like, so when you were listening to these albums, like, did you have like a Walkman, or was it
Oh,
like a tape deck that you had to kind of get
so
tapes for? Like, how what was that situation like?
Both. You hit them right on the head. So I am old enough. I was born in 1983. So I definitely was coming of age in the 90s. But my very first audio player was the very classic yellow Sony Walkman, like that you see in commercials and in the throwbacks and stuff like that. It was that yellow, like indestructible yellow Walkman. You could throw it downstairs and there was nothing that was going to break that thing. And I had that for years. I would listen to tapes on that. I went through many different headphones to it, but I still had the actual Walkman itself, and I loved that thing. I'm actually curious now if that's still around somewhere in my parents' house. I bet it is. It probably still
Right.
works. And then I did what I think it was a Christmas gift or a birthday gift. I was actually given my own tape deck. So it was just a little compact little stereo that you could either plug into the wall, or I think it took like probably like 18 D batteries or something like that to power it for like an hour. But I would listen to a lot of stuff from there. Tune it to the radio because it had a tuner on it as well, and then just put the tapes in and flip them around when they had to go to the next side.
Right. Yeah, I'm similar situation. Like, I was born in '88, so similar. My coming of age was more just as anti-skip CD players were becoming a thing,
Yes.
but the Walkman, like the tape Walkman, was still very much being. It was at least being sold in stores because that was my first portable music device. So I mean, like, my parents, I guess they wouldn't let me get a CD player, maybe, or because the tape thing was an option, like that's was, well, you're gonna get this if that's what you want, kind of thing. Um, so like I had like a boombox in my bedroom, like a
Nice.
stereo that could play CDs, and then it could record to a tape. So
Nice. Yeah, yeah.
I'd get CDs from the library and then put them on tapes and then listen to the tapes in my player.
Okay, so you just reminded me of something I had forgotten for years. That's amazing. Me and my sister would actually host our own radio show using those blank
Oh,
cassette tapes.
that's
So
awesome.
we would basically like push record and record our voices and be like, okay, next up is going to be this song and whatever, do our little chatter thing. And then we would like record from another CD or a tape onto that cassette tape,
That
the
is
song.
amazing.
This is all real time, of course, because it was a tape, so it had to be real time that you were doing
Right.
this with. And then, yeah, coming back on, like, okay, that was that song, and then we do our little banter stuff again, and
So you
that
were
sort of
like
thing.
podcasting before it was cool.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's so good.
Yeah, it was very much against copyright, but we were still doing it.
Thankfully, they weren't going after the 10-year-olds in their bedrooms.
That's right. Sony that shows up on my door. We heard what you were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's my biggest memory, I think, from growing up is having the tapes with the CD player. But because like you only had the one CD or the one tape, and
Right.
like it wasn't an MP3 CD that I was using, it was just like a straight like CD. I have to listen to that tape or CD, like that's the only thing I had to listen to.
Mhm.
So I'd listen to that one tape or that one CD for like a month just
Yeah.
on repeat until I got tired of it, and then just like switch it out and just
That's right. That's right.
get a new one. But like I just remember carrying around like a Beatles, like I had the Beatles one CD,
Yeah,
like
of
the
course. Yeah.
top hits.
I think everyone had that CD for a while.
Yeah, and so I just listened to that for like a month, and I just sing along with the songs. Like it's one of those novelties that you don't realize was even a time in our lives. I think
I know.
like in these days where you have like a streaming service that can stream like literally millions of songs, but
I know
back then,
it's one of those things, and I grapple with this, is that at the same time of me loving the modern day and being like, oh, I like this song, I can listen to it right now. Like I
yeah,
don't have to do anything, I can listen to it right now. But there is something to be said about like you only had this stuff, and so you kind of cherished it a little bit more. It's like, well, these are the only tapes or these are the only CDs I have, and so that is my option.
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and even then, if you were gonna go get more music, like you're at the mercy of what was ever at the store
That's
or at
right.
the library or whatever, right? Like, and then Kazaa or like those types of services came on
Right.
where you
Yeah,
could
yeah.
download whatever you want, and that was kind of the pioneer of digital music, basically,
Yeah.
when people were just literally burning CDs and putting them online for people to download.
Yeah, and I didn't get the internet into our house until I was in grade 7, which what would that have been? That would have been like me 13 or 14 years old at that point. But because I was living out on the farm, like going on the internet was not an easy experience. We were on dial-up modem, phone line type things. So doing anything just took like forever. So the idea of even trying to download a song was probably like, no, this is this is never going to happen, and I'm not going to even try to do it. That was something that happened when I went off to university for sure.
Yeah. To be clear, I didn't download myself either for the same reason. Like we didn't
Yeah.
get 56K internet in our house until about the same time.
Yeah.
And at no point in my childhood did we ever have cable internet. That was like
Right.
a
Right.
pipe dream.
Yeah, I remember. I remember going off to university, had only had dial-up internet, and using the computers at the University of Lethbridge for the first time, and going to a website and it just loaded. I'm like, what? Whoa, like that was so fast. I mean, now I'd probably go there and be like, this is so slow. But for me, it was like that didn't take 2 minutes to load this page. That's amazing.
Yeah. Like when I was a kid, we had 15 minutes of internet time. Like that was our daily allotment. So you'd go down, type in the webpage you want to go to, go up, go to the washroom, get a drink, come back down, see if it was loaded.
Right.
Like it literally
Right.
took that long. And I think even my parents were like our time would be like, we had a little egg timer thing to tell us when our time was up. And I'd be like, oh, can I have like more time? It's like, didn't you already 15 minutes? I'm like, well, it didn't load for the first 5 minutes.
Right.
And they're
Right.
like, oh, really? Like, cause I don't think they really used the computer enough to kind of realize how slow it was.
Yeah, it's not only been recently, and actually not until really my parents started using an iPad that they really started to use the internet in any like extensive way. It was mostly like it was this icon that was down at the bottom that they never interacted with.
Yeah. But no, as far as having like mass music, like my next thing after having the CD player, I had a mini disc player.
Yeah, I never
And
had one of those.
yeah, that was a pretty fancy thing at the time. And so that one, it was a similar situation. I had to burn a bunch of CDs, but the mini discs, you could fit like hundreds of songs on
Yeah.
them. It's like,
Yeah,
oh
no, it was a
wow.
big thing. I remember someone showing me that the first time. I'm like, "This is the future," and then it really wasn't.
Yeah.
I definitely had a Discman, which is what I took off mostly in high school and in the first little bit of university as well. So kept with my Sony products, and I had my Discman. It did have anti-skip as well, but I mean anti-skip to a
Ooh,
point. I
look at
mean,
you,
yeah,
anti-skip.
I know you still couldn't like fling it around too heavily, or it would still not work properly. But yeah, it was like high-end technology back then.
Yeah. No, my first Discman, it did not have anti-skip. And then I had friends who had it and they showed off like their anti-skip. They'd like shake it kind of like this, like
Yeah,
back and forth, back and forth. And it's like, wow, it's still playing. That's amazing.
that's
But if you shook it for like, 30 seconds, then the buffer would run out and then you'd have to let it actually come back because it only had a certain amount of time before like it would pre-record however far ahead so that if it skipped, then it could still
yes,
keep playing.
right.
So, but
All that advanced technology back in the early '90s and
yeah, I
or
know.
sorry, late '90s and early 2000s.
and it's kind of shocking thinking about how recent it was, but how far we've come now. Like it's
Hmm.
like to think back then, even before like smartphones, like the mid 2000s, it was like that seems like distant history to me now.
It really, yeah. Even MP3 players to an extent is just like, what's an MP3 player? I just have a
Yeah.
phone. Like,
Yeah, like a
I,
dedicated music storage device. Like who has that anymore, right?
yeah, it's
Like
like small
even
kids, and that's about it.
yeah. Even Apple, I feel like they discontinued the iPod, didn't they?
They only have the iPod Touch, but yeah, every other iPod is
Right.
discontinued.
Yeah, so iPod Classic, like the scroll
Hmm.
wheel one, that one's not
Yeah,
around
all
anymore.
gone. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So end of an era for sure.
End of an era. R.I.P. R.I.P. MP3.
um so I guess that kind of brings us to today.
Yeah,
Um so I want to talk a bit about the actual technology itself
sure.
and where it's at because I think for the everyday consumer they probably won't notice a difference between like one set of headphones over another. I mean, like
Yeah,
aside from actual like dollar store headphones, you pick up like a $20 pair of headphones, you're probably fine.
yeah. I
But
think
then
really, yeah, unless you would probably be able to tell the difference between, like you're saying, like the $20 pair of headphones that are off the rack versus like a studio pair of headphones that have like a lot more dynamic range that can be broadcast through them. Uh, but even then, I think the majority of people are fine with the way things sound with on their $20 pair of headphones.
right. So did you consider yourself like an audiophile?
Not at all. Like 100% no. In fact, I still have a hard time like really hearing unless I'm just really focused in on it. The minute differences that you're going to get in those things. For better or for worse, going back to the MP3, I think the MP3 has essentially kind of damaged our appreciation for music in a way. Like I think people still like music, obviously, but in order for those first MP3 players so that we could get as many songs as we wanted onto them, that format just compressed everything down. So everything was kind of this wall of noise. You weren't getting those like high highs and those low lows. But again, everyone was kind of fine with that just because good enough is good enough for most people. They don't necessarily need great in that
Right.
space.
You referenced dynamic range. Can you get into that a bit more? Like I
Yeah.
know it has something to do with like frequency bands and that kind of stuff, but like how does that affect how something sounds?
Yeah, the biggest genre I think that gets ruined by this is actually like classical music, instrumental music, because in there, oftentimes in a piece, you have things that are very, very quiet. Like the piece starts off like maybe like super quiet, and then by the end of it, it's reached this crescendo where it's like really loud and like cannons are firing. If it's the 1812 overture, and it just gets super, super loud, and that is the best description of it, because if you're looking at an actual audio file, the actual waveform where we see those like little squiggly lines that showcase like there's sound here, The ones that are smaller are quiet. The ones that are bigger are going to be louder for you. Um, and for our human ear, yeah, we want to hear those differences. If everything is the same level of volume, it actually sounds kind of weird to us because there's not that pitch elevation in our voice that happens naturally. So the dynamic range, yeah, is like there's something that's loud, and then there's also something that's quiet, and it's like the difference in between those two. We can get into like decibel levels if we wanted to, which is like 0 is actually as loud as what most files you want to get up to. If it goes over that, it can sometimes be too loud for us. I can't remember what like a jet engine is and like a car backfiring. They have actually decibel levels that you go into. But when you're mixing, usually depending on the production and depending on the studio, you're trying to mix it so that the loudest part is getting up to 0. And then the quieter parts, you don't want to go too much below like -10.
Right.
Yeah.
And is that due to limitations of the equipment that you'll be listening on?
To a degree, yes. It's also the human ear. Like we don't like things that are like overly loud. Anything over 0, especially if it's like the human voice, you're losing fidelity of the voice. The best example I can give is like if you've ever taken a picture before, you know right away if something is overexposed or underexposed. And the same thing happens in audio. If you get and your audio program that you throw things into is very good at visually showing you this. If things are going into the red, your voice is going into the red, you're essentially overexposing your voice. You're losing detail that the audio program just cannot capture for you. So basically, what's going to do is it's just going to get really loud and really scrambled, and it just is not going to sound all that good. Reverse of that, if you underexpose, if it's way too quiet, then of course people can't hear what you're saying, and you can try and like make that louder, but that's when you get like the ambient background noise also being raised higher. So that fan that's in the background or the car that passed by the window, now those get like even louder as well. So there is a bit of a science to try and capture like the perfect range of audio so that you have a little bit of options of making it sound even a little bit better when you bring it into any audio editing program.
Hmm. So that's relative to the decibel level or loudness or amplitude.
Correct. Yeah.
Is there on the frequency side of things, are the considerations there as well? When
There.
like say if I'm looking at a pair of headphones, are there certain
Oh,
things as far as like frequency, I guess frequency response, I think is the term that's used.
yeah,
Is
and
is
I'll
is
be the first one to admit that I'm not the most knowledgeable on that sort of thing as far as the headphones go. What the biggest one for no matter if it's like what they call in-ear or on-ear headphones is that you're going to get options for like sound isolation and sound canceling. And the difference there is that sound isolation is essentially kind of like earmuffs where they're going over your ears. It's going to cut out some of the noise in the background, but you're still going to be able to hear the background. But it can sometimes cut out a lot so that it's easier to like focus in on the music or the voice that you're listening to. Hopefully, the crying baby you won't hear so much in the background either, but you'll still hear sounds around you. So good if you're walking on a busy street so that you can hear the car honk its horn at you if you accidentally step in front of it. Whereas sound cancellation, there is actually a microphone placed in the headphones that is picking up the background noise and then taking that and just making uh, that same noise cancel itself out for you. So it's basically taking the same like decibel levels and everything and doing this weird little algorithm to record what's going on around you, giving an equally and opposite reaction to it to like cancel that actually out. So you're just listening to the music or the voice that you're listening to, which again, those are the best on airplanes so that you hear nothing but what
right.
you're listening to. I always tell people we're talking about headphones, is kind of dangerous if you're ever in a situation where someone is yelling at you or trying to warn you about something because you're probably not going to hear it.
Right. So the sound canceling is like an active
Yes,
thing. And is it sending the flipped signal out? Or is
correct.
it yeah, okay.
Yeah, so
Like
recording
so that
what's going on around you and then flipping that signal so that that is not being heard at all.
right,
It's
right,
actually what most smartphones actually do nowadays for when you're on a phone call, so that whoever's listening to you is hearing your voice, but not all the surrounding stuff around you, because there's other microphones on the smartphone that are recording it, canceling that out, and just picking up your voice and sending that off to the person.
right. Yeah, actually when I Bluetooth headsets do the same the same kind of thing. Like I know when I bought my wife's Bluetooth headset,
Hmm.
the old one she had, it wasn't very good, and this one had some pretty good reviews on the noise canceling. So the first time she was using it, like she was speaking to her mom, and like her mom didn't even realize that she was in the car. Like
Oh
the
wow.
noise
Okay.
canceling was that good that you couldn't even tell that
Yeah.
she wasn't just in a quiet room, which is pretty impressive to me. And obviously, like a car is a good candidate for noise canceling because the ambient noise is usually pretty
Oh yeah.
consistent. Like
You're in the road
it's
and
not
stuff.
random noise. So like a car driving on the road is a pretty constant kind of like dull roar versus
That's right.
just kind of like drums crashing in the background.
Yeah. This is a quick little side note. Did you ever pick up like the original Bluetooth headphones when they were starting to come out on the market at all?
Actually, my first pair of Bluetooth headphones I bought last year, like
Yeah.
last
Okay.
summer. So I was a fairly late adopter for those.
Um, I never had my own pair, but I remember a friend having like one of the first times Bluetooth was a thing, and listening to music was great. It's awesome. It's like, yeah, I can like I'm free. I can walk around. I don't need to be tethered to anything. But it was only music that I would recommend listening to those because it was still new technology. If you tried watching a video, there was always like a 1 to 2 second delay between the audio transmission, and it was awful to try
Right.
and watch video. Now it's like simultaneous, but
Yeah. Well, even like AirPlay, like
mm,
Apple's standard, like I think that still has a built-in delay
hmm
for that. Like it doesn't have a syncing issue. It's more for when you're screen sharing. There's a
yes,
delay between the video and the audio, I believe.
right,
So if you're screen playing or air playing a screen mirrored video and then sending the audio as well, there'll be like a gap or a delay between it.
yeah,
Their AirPlay 2 is supposed to not need that because it does a similar kind of buffering type deal where
yeah,
it can kind of stream it, sync it, and then like it'll take it, sync it, and then stream it, and then have a bit of a buffer so that it kind of gets rid of that necessary delay just based on the type of transmission that it's using. But yeah, I have heard that when it comes to Bluetooth stuff, I think it's more for like gamers.
yes,
If you're gaming, like you want your audio and video to be synced.
yeah.
It's pretty critical if
Yeah,
you're doing
it's
like
you don't think half a second is much, but it
no.
is like there is our human brains can see that there is something wrong
Yeah.
with
Well, I
that.
know like I used to play Counter-Strike a lot back
Hmm.
in high school and like you'd be in like behind a corner like and you hear footsteps, but if those footsteps aren't synced with the video, then I don't know like you're just going to have a bad time because those
Yeah,
footsteps might be lagged or
exactly.
ahead and you're just not going to be able to react the same way. But yeah, your
Yeah,
brain
how am I
you
supposed to pwn noobs if I can't hear properly?
I can't do my camp sniping if I can't
Yeah,
hear
that's
what's
right.
happening. uh, so the other part of audio that I've been trying to grasp is, I mean, and it's more relevant to recording, like whether it's
Hmm.
podcasting or video recording, I guess, is like the environmental effects.
Yeah,
Like you talked about background noise and stuff. Like, I mean, you can't see it, but in front of or behind my monitors in front of me, there's a bunch of like pillows stacked up
yeah, right,
behind my
right.
monitors to try to absorb noise. Because back before I had them, I had quite a bit of echo that
Yes,
came because like the mic that I have is I guess it's called a condenser mic.
looks like it. Yeah,
Yeah. So it I guess it has good quality, but it picks up a lot of background noise
correct. Yeah, yeah.
compared to a
Dynamic.
dynamic. Yeah, which is a bit more of a directed recording.
Right.
Um so I have like just all the pillows and I maybe you can describe how your booth is set up because you're
Yeah,
standing in an audio recording booth right now, right?
I am. I am inside of a recording booth right now. So instead of pillows, I actually have these soundproof, like styrofoam baffles that are kind of all around me. I have a nice little shielded blanket behind me to also shield me in. So my voice should sound silky smooth coming through when
Nice.
I send you this file afterwards. There are some great tutorials though online on YouTube that you can see like to dress up your room very, very easily. Pillows work really, really well. Egg cartons can also work for you
Hmm.
very, very well, and like pasting those up on the wall just so that you don't have quite a forceful like reverb when you speak. Because when you speak, and if it hits a flat surface, it is going to bounce back at you a little bit. Doesn't matter where you are. What these baffles and what your pillows are doing are softening that. So even though when it comes back, it's not coming back quite so hard or quite so forcefully for you, which is nice. So there's different ways to dress that up. specifically. Different microphones will definitely help as well. Some that are very, very directional, so they can cut out some of the background noise that might be going on in a room. And there's other ones like lapel mics, right? Those ones that you can clip on to your shirt or something like that. Again, those are only going so far, so they should be able to reach your mouth and like pick up your noise, but should not be picking up a bunch of the other stuff going on around you as well, unless it's like super, super loud, and then it
Right.
might pick it up. So there's different ways to kind of dress a room and different mics to kind of consider depending on the environment that you're in.
Do you have much experience with like I think they're called shotgun mics?
Yep, I use some of that too for interviews if I ever go out into the field and want to do like a This American Life style program and sort of thing. So yes, I've had experience with shotgun mics. Those ones are great because they pick up sound really, really well, no matter what you're pointing at. It's like there's like that line, and it can sometimes be like it's 100 feet away, but it's picking up that thing that I'm pointing at. It's like right over there.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, trying depending on the amplitude and all the other stuff that you can play around with
Hmm.
those as well. But if you're pointing it at someone's face, then it should be picking up them. Yeah, so shotgun mics are great because again, they're probably not going to be picking up you very much, so you'd have to hold the mic towards your mouth and stuff to pick that up. You can also get the very like if you the standard microphone that like a reporter uses on the news. Those also work really, really well if you're out in the field and that's the type of program that you're wanting to create.
But for like a podcaster,
Yeah.
it would seem that like I mean the Snowball or
Mm.
the Yeti is it, or not Yeti makes the
Yep.
Snowball, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Blue is the company, and they make the Snowball and they make the Yeti.
yeah. And then like mine's the Samson Meteor, so that one's another common condenser mic. But like I've seen some of the shotgun mics out there too, and
Yes.
they seem to be pretty good for podcasting, but they always say that they're great for like video because you're pointing a camera and then like it's directional already, but like
Yes.
intentionally directional, and then you have the mic pointing where the camera's pointing, so it makes sense that it's good for video. But it didn't seem that it was very applicable to like podcasting.
Yeah, it's weird because I think that with an audio only format, I, before I actually get into this is very much personal preference, I think, but there's lots of arguments you can get onto online about this. But for podcasting with the audio only format, I do like the way that condenser mics make people's voices sound more. So it's a much more full, rich sound and almost more real. I find to my ear, whereas the shotgun mic is picking up your voice really well, but there's almost a little bit of detachment that I find from it because it is cutting out some of the ambient noises that are inside the room.
Hmm.
So right away, it's almost this artificial sound that's being created for you. So it's kind of this weird give and
Right.
take depending on what format you're in or what you need to do, sort of thing.
Right. Well, I was joking about the keyboard clacks, but that's actually one of the things that I do. I like hearing that in a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it kind of brings you into the room with them a little bit. Like when I'm listening to a podcast, I feel like I'm a part of the conversation with them. So when I hear like the keyboard clacking or the clicks or the chair squeak or that kind of thing, like it almost adds something.
Yeah, it depends on the
to the
host
show.
and how well they can carry on a conversation. Because I do agree with you. It's really awkward because I was just talking about this somewhere. I think it was actually on my podcast yesterday. Anyways, which is I go into Reddit sometimes. Well, I go into Reddit every day, but I mean,
Who
sometimes
doesn't?
sometimes I go into the subreddit for like podcasters and podcasting, and I read certain threads, and I leave convinced that nobody likes podcasting because it's like, I hate it when there's music in a podcast, and I hate it when like the host squeak their chair, and I hate it when this happens. I'm like, but that's what a podcast is. I don't know what you're talking about. Like,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But you referenced before we started recording Roderick on the Line, which is one of my favorite podcasts. But that is the most lowest tech podcast that you can possibly hear. It's literally just like raw audio. Any mistake, any cough, any keyboard overbearing clacking it's all in there.
Yeah.
And you're hearing the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, the cough is like a signature of the show.
Yeah. It is. It very much is. They use that as a transition into like ad reads.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but no, I mean, I actually don't. really like the overly produced podcasts,
Hmm.
like the NPR style podcasts. That's
Sure.
just not that's it's a radio show, right? Which is fine,
Hmm.
like if that's what you like and what you're looking for. But for me, I like hearing conversations and very like natural, as opposed to like an overly produced with like a narrator and then like transitions back and forth between segments. Like it's that's just not the kind of style that I prefer. So
Hmm.
so all the ones I listen to, they're very much, yeah, keyboard clacks and
Right.
coughs and like, I mean, like it's part of the experience for me, for
Oh yeah,
sure. Yeah.
absolutely. I want to feel more like I'm part of them. There's a comedy podcast that I listen to, and there's a little bit of production on it, but really it's just them for like an hour, which is my brother and me, which
Oh, I've
is
heard of that one. Yeah. My bit
it's
bam.
yeah, Mabim Bam, which is fairly popular out there nowadays. But I've always felt that, which is like I'm in the middle of these people goofing around for an hour, and I'm totally fine with that. I don't need something more
Yeah.
than these three people making fun of things.
So I'm very curious about your media lab. So your
Yeah,
sound booth, it's in your media lab.
it
You
is.
built
Yeah.
that yourself, presumably, or at least with help of other
With help,
people.
yeah,
With
not
help.
not with my bare hands, I created this.
Many bare hands.
Yeah.
So like if you're willing, will you give a bit of insight and maybe tell a bit of a story of how that came about?
How Media
Just
Lab came about?
yeah, the whole thing. I'm very
Yeah.
curious because I think a lot of people will take something like podcasting and just they hear professional podcasters and say, "Oh, I'd love to get into that and make that my job," even if it's not being a podcaster, but just something related to podcasting or tech or whatever.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but it's to take it from being a hobby to a career and a
Yeah.
livelihood. Like how do you do that? How did you do that? And how
So,
have you brought it to the point where it is now?
through sheer force of will. So the quick story about this is that my first love was YouTube and online video, and I was a big fan of the stuff that was being produced on there. And I happened to be in California for a convention this one year, and I was like, "Oh, I'm here in LA. I should go and see the YouTube space, which is owned by Google, and it's kind of a similar concept, whereas there's uh, video production sites and like green screens and the cameras and editing stations and the whole nine yards." And I was like, "Okay, I'm going to go there." And they did some quick research to see where it was, and then I found out from their website that, oh, I can't actually go there. I can't even get into the building unless I have a certain amount of subscribers. So
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, well, good that I didn't make the trip over there and find it out when I got
Yeah.
there."
I
But
think
still,
when I heard about that, because I always heard about like one of my, I guess you'd call it a dream. One of my ambitions is to go to Silicon Valley and do a bunch of like the whole like the Silicon Valley tourist type thing, right? Like
right,
or
right,
the
right.
tech tourist, whatever you want to call it. And I
Sure.
was like, oh, I'll see like Facebook and I'll see Apple and I'll
Right,
see
right.
all these cool and then like people are like, you can't actually tour them, like you can go
Right.
stand outside the building, but you can't actually like I'm like,
Take your
what?
picture by the sign, and that's
That's the
about it.
whole
Yeah.
reason why I wanted to go. Like I wanted to see like I mean, like not the offices, but just see like do a tour. I don't know. Like you go to the Empire State Building, you do a tour, you go where like I thought it
That's
was the
right.
same kind of thing, right? But it's
You
like
go and
no.
meet King Kong on the top floor, like every tourist in New York.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah,
like
it is interesting how walled off they really are for the most part. Yeah, I mean, so I was really disappointed. I was sitting on the plane. I'm like, oh, this bums me out. I wish that there was a place here in Calgary, at least, that there was video producers and other creators could come and join in and learn from each other and just have access to all this equipment. And then that was when the light bulb went off, and I was like, oh, well, maybe I could be the person who does that because I'm a narcissist. um, so yeah, that was my journey in that it took me about 18 months from that initial idea on the plane for it to actually become a real thing. And that was going in like finding money from the bank and from family members and getting the equipment and finding a place to actually have it from. All this kind of stuff layered on to be where we are today, where it's open, running, and you can kind of come and use all the stuff that's here and come and join in all the education that's also being provided from Media Lab.
cool. So like you just did it.
I just
That's kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah,
There's
I
no
mean,
there's no
that's like
there's no secret recipe. There's no like you didn't go to like a guru and get guidance. It's like I'm gonna do that, and so you did.
Yeah, that's basically what I did. I mean, I definitely had help along the way. I even did have a business coach for a little bit
Oh, cool.
just to point me in the right direction. But a lot of it was just like, I know I want this to be a thing, so I'm just going to make it be a thing and then roll a dice and see where we go from there. Really, it's been a huge learning curve for me now being a business owner, having never really thought that I would be an entrepreneur. That wasn't anything that I was aspiring to be necessarily, but I kind of just found myself in that position. And now I read a lot of books and try and figure out how I'm supposed to do this.
Right.
And really, what you find out is that nobody knows. It's like when I became when I was in like my mid 20s and I came to this crushing realization that like, oh, I thought like by now I would just know what an adult was supposed to do in situations, and then I looked around like, oh, nobody knows. Everyone's just making this up as they go along, and that was both kind of terrifying and liberating at the same time.
Right. It's interesting because like my wife right now, like we've like, and I guess both of us for that matter, will often kind of like think about like we should start a business, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
you know, you get to a point in your life or your career where it's like, I mean, you've been working however long, but you feel that you could do things better than other people, kind of,
Yeah.
and
Right.
not
Right.
in like a egoistic way. Maybe it is, but it's like I could do this. I could do this better than what's being offered right now, right? And
Yeah.
whatever that thing is. But then you start thinking about the logistics of it
Yeah.
or the financials of it, and you start trying to crunch numbers and all that kind of stuff. And every time we come to the realization that if you think about it too much and try to make that decision to start your own business as a this makes financial sense, like you're never
Yeah.
going to start your own business. Like I just,
Yeah. I mean,
you
and
know
the
what I
thing is
mean?
about, I mean, there is calculated risks and there's like really like you needed to workshop this a little bit more. There's always going to be those two extremes. But I mean, the two examples I always give to this sort of thing, especially the people who are like, I don't know if that's like a great idea, is that the famous quote from Henry Ford, who said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Right? It's like,
Mhm.
well, I decided to make a car, and then it made everyone look and be like, oh, yeah, no, that is actually what I want, is this thing over here. And that
Right.
was the whole philosophy of Steve Jobs for the longest time, right? It's like everyone's going to want a computer, even though everyone told him, it's like, no one's going to want a computer in their house. And he's like, no, people are going to want this, and I'm going to make it happen and show people that they actually do want this.
Right.
And then kind of slowly force the industry upon everyone.
Right. But I mean, it's not like those like Henry Ford or Steve Jobs or even any other business
Yeah.
person who's starting up their own business today punches numbers in a calculator and comes up with a number greater than what they're making now. It's like, oh, I'll go do that. It's like
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
typically always going to be lower, if not zero, if not negative.
Yeah, for the
And
first few years,
for
you're
the
going to be
first,
running like deficits and and being
yeah,
in so much debt.
yeah, no, and like you said, that there is a risk, right? So if
Yeah,
you're not willing to take a risk, then it's probably not for you at that point in
right.
time, right?
Mhm.
But no, that's really cool that I mean you're doing it now. And have you found people using Media Lab in ways that you didn't expect, or you didn't anticipate a certain aspect of it to be as well received or as utilized as it has been?
There's two things I guess I'll say about that. Number one, like the original concept of the idea was I thought that individuals would be coming in and using this. And what has become much more interesting and much more eye-opening is that there's so many businesses who want to come in and use it, and for both podcasting and video services, where it's like we need help with our video strategy, or we need help like creating a podcast for our clients because we think that they would enjoy it. And I just did not even really conceptualize that need necessarily.
Hmm.
I thought there might be, but it's like, wow, okay, there's much more demand out there than I'd even thought previously. So that was a little bit eye-opening. The other one is actually right before I opened, I actually had this realization because again, I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure that most people are going to come in here for video work. And right as I was opening Media Lab, I was like looking at some reports and some things about podcasting and the audio space in general. I'm like, you know what? No, I think getting started here, there's going to be so many people coming in and using the podcast services, which has turned out to be right. Is like that is by far what the majority of people come in for.
Hmm. Now, do you offer the creative services as well when people come in to do recordings and stuff?
I do. So you can come in and just use the space to record your thing for like $35 an hour. You can come in and record for as long as you want within that hour, obviously, or go longer if you need to. And then there's package deals if you want me then to edit that information for you, or you take the file and you do whatever you want with it at that point.
Hmm. I think, like we were talking about before, like I have just started getting into the editing side of things. Like a lot of the podcasts that I listen to, the people doing the podcast also do the editing, obviously. And they'll often talk about it on their shows. And it's always interested me, like the types of considerations that go into editing and the creative control that people have, like the cutting and like inserting sounds or the ads and like all this kind of stuff. That was always very fascinating to me, and I always wanted to try it. But like Rob has always been the one doing that because like he had experience doing that, and it was easier just to have him kind of do it for all the shows that we do.
For sure.
But this has kind of been my opportunity the last couple shows to try my hand at it, and is definitely a lot more involved and easy to screw things up than I would have realized. Like this last episode of Future Chat, like with the three of us, and I think it's more just the order that I was doing things in, because I wasn't really, no fault of Rob's, though he did say, oh, I probably could have told you that in hindsight. But when I was loading in the tracks and doing my cuts, like I'd load in like all the voice tracks plus like the ad track plus like the intro music track all at the same time, instead of doing all my edits on just the voice and then inserting in the other stuff after.
Classic mistake.
Yeah. So then I was doing like the cutting. I was like, I'd forget to select one of the tracks.
Oh,
and so so like that actually ended up happening. Yeah, it ended up happening that I think one of the tracks was misaligned slightly because I trusted that everyone clicked their button at the right time. So that didn't work. And Rob was like, "Oh, you're supposed to align it like based on this conversation, like the actual speech." I'm like, "Well, I don't. It looked fine." Like,
right. Yeah, that's the interesting thing, because you're only looking at waveforms, is that you can visually see certain things, but you do still have to kind of listen back in many cases to make sure you've actually done it right. Whereas video editing is like when I do something, oh, I can see right away, did that work? Did that not work?
Yeah,
that sort of thing. So it's a little bit tricky, and then you're dealing with, especially when there's like 3 different tracks of people recording. Well, this person's voice is maybe too low, so I have to bump that up, and he's too high, so let me put him down, and like trying to make sure that it all sounds proper.
Right. What types of I don't know if you'd call them filters, but what types of algorithms do you apply to audio when you're doing your audio editing?
I've definitely gotten better at this, and if you listen to any of my early episodes of either of my podcasts, you can tell that I didn't do this. But nowadays, every single track usually gets a compressor thrown onto it, which just allows things like the lowest one, the lowest parts of the track are going to get bumped up, and if the highest parts are going to get bumped down, and you can control like, this is like the highest point I want you to bring down, and this is the lowest point I want you to bring up, so that everything kind of meets in the middle a little bit, and then you can still take that file and still raise the whole track up or down depending on what you need. So definitely a compressor. And then that's honestly at this point really the only real big thing that I put on. I don't do any type of effects normally to like deepen people's voices or anything like that. So yeah, compressors are kind of the biggest one that I use currently.
And do you have a process, like a certain order that you do things in? Like if you have, say, a couple voice tracks and then, a couple sound effects tracks and then like whether it's music or whatever, and then like a couple ad tracks kind of thing.
Yeah, that's usually the way it is. So we'll use assumptions as an example. So there's going to be my track and Daniel's track. I'll throw a compressor on both of ours. I'll listen to like the first couple of minutes to see how that sounds, and usually what that means is bumping my voice up, because my voice is usually quieter because I talk a little bit quieter, and Daniel's is very loud, so I usually have to bring him down a little bit so that we sound at about the same level in that case.
And that's a flat decibel adjustment, or is it a compressor type?
That's a compressor that does it for me, and then after that I'll either raise or lower the track's decibel level as I feel like I need to. Then once I've listened through the whole thing and I've cut out any awkward pauses, maybe sometimes we made some mistakes, or yeah, anything like that that I think just helps out the audio track. What I'll then do is bring in the music. Music I always find is mixed really loud, so I usually have to bring that down a little bit just so it's not super overbearing. Make sure that that fades out in the proper ways, and then I usually do the ad reads afterwards. So I do the ad reads on assumptions. So once I have it the way I need to, I try and find a place in the middle where I can do my little ad break. I'll make my cut, separate the two out, and then do my ad read, and then do my outro at the very end, put that in there, and then call it done.
Right. I think that was my mistake this last time, was trying to do, like, I tried to do everything linearly as I went. So, okay.
Right.
So my first mistake was starting from the beginning,
Sure.
instead of starting at the end, so that as you're cutting and shifting, like, your
Right.
timestamp. So like when I'm writing down my timestamps for my editing, what I do is I go to my first timestamp, make my edit, and they'll go to my next one. But I've shifted it because I've either cut
Right.
or done whatever. So my timestamp shifted. So by the time I get to my last one, it's like not anywhere close to where I originally put it.
Mhm.
So if you're editing timestamps, it's better to start at the end and work your way backwards, because then at least all your timestamps stay where they're supposed to
Oh,
be.
absolutely. Yeah.
So that was my first mistake. Then my next mistake was I brought in all my tracks at the same time. So then again starting at the beginning. So my tracks at the end, I had to make sure to select that track on the cut so that it shifted appropriately, the right amount. Again, instead of doing it at the end once I've already made my edits, and then I'm just inserting in all the extra stuff that don't need to be cut.
Sure.
So again, like, this took, though, the whole editing of the thing I think took a couple hours when it
Wow.
should have taken like 15 minutes. I just made things way harder for myself than they should have been. But again, like, I guess I almost preferred to have experienced that and seen, that that's probably not a good way, than someone just saying, oh, do this and this and this because of this, but
Yeah.
not realizing that there is actually a good reason for it. Like, just kind of taking their word for it, like, oh, I guess that makes sense. But having done it myself and seeing what it's like if you don't do that thing, I think that helps a lot more, because then I'll actually remember, like, I don't want to get into that situation again.
Oh yeah, I mean that's like one of my biggest lessons, and I always loved him for it. Well, having a project when you're trying to learn a program is like the best way to learn a program because you are actually like, I needed to do this, so I have to figure out how to do this. Back when I was, for a very short time, a technician to like repair phones, smartphones, and stuff like that. The person that was teaching me told me, it's like, okay, we need to replace the screen. Can you just replace the screen? So I blah blah blah, do all my thing, put the screen back on, put it in, try to turn it on, it doesn't turn on.
Uh-oh.
Right? I was like, oh no, what happened? He's like, well, you forgot to attach that one cable, blah blah blah. I'm like, oh, well, why didn't you tell me? He's like, well, now you'll never do it again, because now you have to undo the entire thing on the phone, redo everything that you just did. And and I was like, oh, you're right, 100%. So that was a great teaching moment, and one that I really value. Sometimes you have to make a mistake to be like, I'm never going to do that ever again.
Yeah. Especially when the mistake isn't like catastrophic, that you can
Right.
easily fix it. Like at work, that happens all the time when I'm training someone or just showing someone something new, and you let them try it a certain way first, let them struggle with it for a bit, and then you just say, oh, how's it going? And then it's like, oh, I'm trying. It's like, oh, have you tried it this way? I'm like, oh, that was way easier, right?
Yeah.
But at least, like, you give them a chance to like discover that themselves, and if they don't do that, then they'll remember having tried it,
Yeah.
and like you said, then they won't kind of do it that way again, because they've already seen what kind of situation they get into.
Yeah. Initially, it sounds mean, but letting people struggle a little bit is a great way for people to learn properly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Again, as long as it's not a catastrophic thing that can be easily undone. Like,
no,
if
I will let them rear end that truck in front of us.
or if you're like building a house, you like pour the foundation wrong. It's like you can't really redo that as easily. But
those
if you're
aren't
like
nails that you're using, what are you doing?
But if you're like building a fence and you're making some cuts and it's like, oh, you should try it this way, then at least that's a little bit more easy to fix than some other situations, for sure.
What editing? Oh, you said Audacity is what you use, correct?
Yeah. Like I record in Audacity, and I guess it has
Yeah,
enough tools in it to do its own
for
editing as
sure.
well.
Mhm.
Rob uses the Adobe product.
Audition.
Audition, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, great.
So I think that one's a bit more fancy.
Yeah, it's more robust. There's a lot more things you can add into it.
Yeah, because he was mentioning he has like some templates saved,
Great.
and I don't know if Audacity does templates, but it seems like it'd be a useful thing, especially like you said, if every episode has like two voice tracks,
Yeah,
two music tracks and an ad, right? Then
yeah.
at
You
least you
can
can kind
easily
of
just throw it in.
save that same kind of thing. So I'll have to play around with that a little bit more. But oh, you mentioned about getting into the video YouTube side of things. Like
Yeah,
that had always interested me as well, especially having like done podcasting, and it seems like a kind of a natural thing to get into or to at least experiment with. And I've done a couple videos, but they're not usually like featuring me.
sure. Yeah,
They're
yeah,
just kind of like, hey, I'm in this place, check it out. Or I mean, like we obviously post the episodes that we record here on
yeah.
the podcast, but we're not really making them to be video
hmm
produced. It's
No,
just
but I think that's what I like about podcasting too, which is that in a video format, you do have to understand certain things, like especially if this is something that you want for like lots of people to see. Like it does have to be framed in a certain way. You do have to like be presentable in some type of form, and that sort of thing. And with a podcast, I think like you need a microphone, you need a computer or a smartphone nowadays is all you really need. And as long as you can speak about what you're passionate about, then that's all you really need as far as a setup. You don't have to worry about like lighting and camera placement and all this other stuff that goes into it.
yeah, absolutely. And you can definitely tell a lot more when someone's video setup is bad or good.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
compared to like audio, it's like if it sounds good, if it sounds okay,
Yeah.
then you probably can't tell too much. And it's a lot easier to get a good or okay sounding audio than it is to get a good looking video, I think.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Because like you were talking about with like the Blue Yeti or even the Snowball, there are still in the iTunes charts like top 100 subscribed to podcasts. That is still the microphone that they use. You can make it sound really really good by just having a pretty inexpensive microphone.
mhm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I mean, like a lot of even the local like Calgary video creators, like a
hmm
lot of their videos are very professional looking. Like I'm
Yeah.
very impressed by them, and I think that's kind of what encouraged me a bit to think a bit more about getting into the video production side of things, because it does look really cool, and a good looking video would be pretty rewarding, I think. But
Yeah.
I mean, like it's a huge time sink, like even more so than podcasting and editing that podcast, because you have
Sure.
the actual production time, like the recording time of the video, plus the editing of it. And the editing would probably be 10 times
Oh
more
yeah.
tricky
I don't
than the
know
audio.
how many I'll call it wasted time, but like waiting for even just video to import onto a computer is sometimes just like time consuming.
Yeah.
Whereas audio, even if I record it separately on say like a Zoom recorder or something, it's there in like 5-10 seconds. It does even if it's an hour long show, it's like poof, here, it's there. And now you can start to edit it. With videos like minutes upon minutes that it takes to import, and then you open it up in your video editor, and then you have to put it into there, and then that has to transcode sometimes. And so it's like, okay, it's been an hour and I still haven't actually started editing any video yet.
Yeah. I don't know if you listen to any of CGP Gray's podcasts,
Right.
but he'll often bring up, his struggles with computer hardware and trying to find something that works for him, and always looking for something like better and faster kind of thing, right? And
Yeah.
like for sure I can understand what benefit there is to having a fast and powerful computer to do that, because like yeah, even exporting the MP3 file, like the just encoding it took a couple minutes. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
crazy, but it was minutes, when
Yeah.
computers these days are usually like seconds or instant for a lot
Right.
of stuff, right? It's like, wow, this actually takes an amount of time.
That's
But
right. That's
yeah,
right.
I can't imagine like a video and having to upload like a 25-minute video kind of thing with all the edits and all that kind of stuff into it.
That's cool. Yeah.
So what's next for Media Lab? Are we
That's a good open question.
I mean,
Uh,
you mentioned about like the companies, like the corporate side of things, and like I know there's a lot of businesses out there that are kind of big on the social media stuff.
yeah.
Like they're using that to their advantage to access their audience, to give value to their brand, all that kind of stuff. That does actually, talking about it, it does seem like a pretty good fit for Media Lab to cater to that
Yeah.
market, I think.
So it's interesting because I just spent part of this morning really strategizing about what my strategy is going to be moving forward in both video strategies and audio strategies. So stay tuned for that. There's a new website being built for me too, which should hopefully be
Mm,
up and running here within the next couple of weeks, which is good. Because honestly, all I had up there was basically like, here's some stuff about Media Lab as I opened up, just so that there was something there and some sort of presence. But now I need to go a little bit deeper and allow people to book more effectively and stuff online as well. I think that there is two components to this, which is that there is the obvious, like, Media Lab is here as a community service for you to come in and be able to use equipment and learn from or learn on it, and all that good stuff, collaborate with other people. But there's also like the production side of things right now that's basically focused on my own personal like YouTube channel and podcasts that I'm making. But there's other ideas I have. I'm taking meetings here in the next couple of weeks to start to layer on other productions that I want to have under the Media Lab banner more specifically. I could see in the future, and what I'm kind of working towards is to be kind of an umbrella term. You're probably familiar with companies like Gimlet or Maximum Fun or Earwolf. These are all three of those are podcasting companies who have like dozens of podcasts underneath them.
mm,
They don't like have any editorial control over what happens on those podcasts, but they're all kind of part of something on like a specific network of shows. So if you are someone who is like their Patreon supporter, you get like extra little goodies and stuff in the background and stuff as well. I can see Media Lab turning into something like that, which is I'm here helping to produce a lot of content. I'm not telling you what to make your content on. I'm just here to help you and hopefully give some money as far as like the big pool that's coming in and stuff as well. That's what I'm working towards here, at least. So there's the stuff I'm producing, hopefully stuff that I can start to produce for other people as well, and constantly having educational opportunities. I'm really trying to figure out the sweet spot for that, which is like time of day, time of the week, topics, like what drives people to want to come in, what is it that people want to learn about, and making sure that there's value for when they do come out here and learn about that. So
mm.
lots of stuff that's coming out.
Cool. Yeah, I've attended a couple of the sessions that you've hosted
Hmm.
for which was the podcast meetup group, I believe it's
Yeah,
called
there's there on
Podcasters.
yeah. I think was it called Calgary Casters. I think is
Oh,
what it's
okay.
called now. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, because yeah, it's for video and audio casting. I think that was the idea
I think
behind
yeah,
that.
it's supposed to be for both. Yeah,
Yeah. So that's really cool. And then I know that you're partnering. I've seen a couple events pop up on your page about partnering with a couple other local businesses. I think you're doing an art show, art
yeah.
exhibit type
It's
thing.
actually tonight as we record this. We're
Oh,
doing
cool.
a photography showing. So a local photographer's coming in and showing off his work. Um, there's another a person who just joined the Alberta Podcast Network, Callum Lycan, who does the Bothy Storytelling podcast. He's going to be hosting a storytelling workshop for basically an entire day here at the end of April. Yeah, there's just a bunch of stuff that's going on.
Cool. Yeah, it seems like partnerships are a pretty key
Yeah.
strategy, especially for a local business. Like these days, you can't go 100 feet without seeing someone who serves like Fiasco Gelato or like Rosso Coffee or that kind of
That's
thing,
so
right?
true. Yeah, yeah. I
Because
think
like
it. Yeah,
I mean, like, and is really good, like for the brand, just brand recognition, but also just from a distribution aspect. It's like these places they have the brick and mortar stores, but you don't need to be at the store to get the product.
right. Exactly. So yeah, and there's actually partnerships I'm trying to form that way as well as. I won't say what it is yet, but there's an idea I have in the back of my head that I can see being able to attend Media Lab stuff, but not having to necessarily come to Media Lab. So
Yeah.
asterisks on that, and we'll find out more about that soon. Um, and what I've really taken as a example is that the craft beer industry here in Alberta has really blown up over the last few years. And there's so many different breweries that are now opened up in Calgary, and they have their restaurants that they usually have attached to their breweries as well. But every single person that's in that community is helping each other out. So even though there's like 24 of them nowadays, they're not like, I'm going to crush my competition here in Calgary. It's like, no, like, let me tell you how we did this for our business. Maybe that'll help you out and attract more customers to yours. And like, we can help share ideas back and forth. And I think that is maybe the new way of doing business, which is that I don't need to treat everyone as a foe. I can like bring everybody in and we can help each other out going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole, rising tide makes the ship grow stronger, whatever the thing is.
Yeah. 2 in the bush is worth 7 in the hand.
But no, like, I mean, just like thinking, it's like you walk into an electronics store, like a computer store or whatever. And I mean, like a lot of places they're good about knowing what they're talking about, like Memory Express, they usually have pretty good experiences with, and they have their kind of service desk. But I mean, nothing against Best Buy, but I mean, you walk into Best Buy, you're not going to have a good time if you don't really know what you're looking for, or kind of need that help. I'm like, not to blanket everyone, because I'm sure there's experience and good people.
I never trust a person in khakis. I can't do it.
But it's like, I think that type of thing, though, it could be more of like a competition aspect. But if you say, hey, I'm an expert in this, and I'd like to have kind of like a media lab set up in your store that people could come and consult with, and sign up for classes or workshops and that kind of thing, that'd be pretty cool, because your audience or your target demographic is in those stores anyway, and then it helps the stores themselves. They can advertise, hey, we have a media lab in our store. But they don't have to be hiring people based on like, well, how much do you know about microphones, right? It's like, well, the media lab can take care of that, right? And you can cross train and whatever employees as well, but at least to have, say, hey, we have a media lab in our store, so that people will go make a point to go there if they're looking for audio devices or whatever, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or video or that kind of thing. So, no, I think that's really promising that you're growing these partnerships and having these events and that kind of stuff, and I'm excited to see where it goes, because there really isn't anything like it in Calgary, right? And I mean, like, just the concept of it, like, you have studios, like recording studios, but those are typically like hundreds to, I don't want to say thousands of dollars an hour, but hundreds of dollars an hour to get time in, right? And you're kind of fitting into a different niche or different purpose.
Come with some friends, $35 an hour for your audio recording, or $70 an hour if you want to come and film some stuff.
Yeah, cool. So where can people find you online, Kyle?
In so many different places. I am the Kyle Marshall. That's Marshall with 2 L's on pretty much every platform except for YouTube, which is the unfortunate part. But Kyle Marshall, if you just search for Kyle Marshall, you'll find me on YouTube. As far as Media Lab goes, that one has a little bit more integration. It is Media Lab YYC on every single platform.
Oh, look at you. Getting that name everywhere you need to. Yeah. that's rare to be able to find your name in all the platforms. Cool. And yeah, like we said, you can find Kyle's podcast Assumptions on albertapodcastnetwork.com, and your other show on the
whatever this is on Apple Podcasts. You'll find us there, or on Google Play, or really pretty much anywhere you download podcasts.
Cool. And I'm sure your shows are all on your Twitter profile or whatever.
Oh yeah, they're all over the place.
Find it there. You'll find them if you try. Find them.
I am lousy with self promotion.
Cool.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, Kyle.